Iran is doing. Finally, the 5 Americans who have been moved from prison to home detention and who we expect to come home in the weeks ahead are Americans who've been found to be designated as wrongfully detained. We continue to look and will always continue to look at the situations, conditions of other Americans around the world who may be detained. I can't, for reasons of privacy, I can't talk about any individual cases. I can simply say that as a matter of policy, we're constantly reviewing whether any particular individual, whether an American citizen or a legal permanent resident who is incarcerated in another country, is wrongfully detained. And that, of course, triggers a whole series of actions and steps that we take to try to secure their release.
Olivia, in the back.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, very much. Two separate questions for you. One is, do you expect this weekend's level of engagement to continue on an annual basis with South Korea and Japan? And secondly, today marks 2 years since the Taliban took over Kabul as the U.S. withdrew its forces there. They've declared it a national holiday. They've recognized it as a great victory. As you're no doubt aware, human rights, and especially women's rights, to say that they have been trampled there is an understatement. Many people there have been said that it's worse than they feared. So hearing that, seeing that 2 years in after the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, how do you believe the U.S. has done by the Afghan people and by the Afghan partners who remain stranded there?
Thank you. So on the trilateral cooperation, I think what you can expect to see coming out of this summit is collaboration on a trilateral basis that is further institutionalized in a variety of ways, to include regular meetings at a variety of levels, senior levels in our governments. So that is something that I fully expect to see come out of Friday. With regard to Afghanistan, you've heard me say this before. I'll repeat it now. The decision to withdraw from Afghanistan was an incredibly difficult one, but also the right one. We ended America's longest war. For the first time in 20 years, we don't have another generation of young Americans going to fight and die in Afghanistan. And in turn, that has enabled us to even more effectively meet the many challenges of our time, from great power competition to the many transnational issues that we're dealing with that are affecting the lives of our people and people around the world. But to do so even as we continue to work on supporting the Afghan people. We have some enduring commitments when it comes to Afghanistan. Those haven't changed. We want to make sure that we continue to make good on any American citizens who happen to be in Afghanistan and who wish to depart. And as you know, we brought back virtually all of the American citizens who said they wanted to depart in the course of the withdrawal, and that effort continued well after and continues to this day. And I believe some 900 or so additional American citizens who told us at one point or another that they wanted to leave, we've made sure could get home. At the same time, we are continuing to make very steady progress when it comes to making good on our responsibilities and commitments to our partners in Afghanistan, who were with us for many, many years. Through August 1, 2023, between that period and when we left, so August 31st to August 1st of this year, nearly 34,000 special immigrant visas to principal applicants and their family members have been issued and have been, and these people have been able to leave Afghanistan and come to the United States. We remain the leading donor of humanitarian assistance to the Afghan people, some $1.9 billion since August of 2021. And we continue to work to hold the Taliban accountable for the many commitments that it's made and not fulfilled, particularly when it comes to the rights of women and girls. We've been very clear with the Taliban, and dozens of countries around the world have been very clear that the path to any more normal relationship between the Taliban and other countries will be blocked unless and until the rights of women and girls, among other things, are actually supported. So this is an area of ongoing focus, of ongoing commitment, and that won't cease.
Vivian, go ahead.
Thanks so much, Mr. Secretary. I wanted to ask two questions, one on Iran, just sort of following up on Humera. With regard to the transfer of funds, which the U.S. has said you're working out the details, what kind of enforcement mechanisms are we going to see so we know that the Iranian government is not necessarily abusing those funds, and then that would somehow be connected to the deal that the U.S. had partially brokered to get their funds released? And very quickly on Niger, President Bazoum remains in detention and the coup leaders are holding steady. The U.S. has maintained that it's holding out hope for some sort of diplomatic resolution, but that so far hasn't bared fruit. And so, very bluntly, would the U.S. support any type of military action that ECOWAS has threatened? Or do you see any alternatives to resolve this situation? Thank you.
Thanks. So first on Iran. And it's important to be very, very clear about this. The funds in question are not American funds. They're not American taxpayer money. They are Iranian funds that have been in South Korean banks for a number of years. From day one of our sanctions, there has always been an exemption for the use of funds for humanitarian purposes. The previous administration allowed several countries to continue purchasing oil from Iran and to place those funds in special accounts. And they allowed those accounts to be spent down for humanitarian for purposes with actually limited oversight. And that's the funds in South Korea. That's how they wound up there in the first place. The dollars that are being made available, that is Iranian funds that are being made now available to Iran, this is a way of actually facilitating their use strictly for humanitarian purposes and in a strictly controlled way. Again, purposes that have been exempt from day one from our sanctions. Iran will not have direct access to these funds. There will be significant oversight and visibility from the United States. With regard to Niger, first we reiterate the imperative of releasing President Bazoum, his family, from detention. And we reiterate the imperative of returning to the constitutional order in Niger. We're in strong support of what ECOWAS is doing to achieve exactly those results. You heard from ECOWAS just a couple of days ago about how they see the path forward. And we remain very focused on diplomacy for achieving the results that we want, which is the return to the constitutional order. And I believe that there continues to be space for diplomacy in achieving that result. The pressure that's been exerted by many countries, including through ECOWAS, on the military leaders responsible for disrupting the constitutional order in Niger is mounting. I think they have to take that into account, as well as the fact that their actions have isolated them from the region and from the world, as well as the fact that there is a diplomatic path forward under the Constitution that would restore a constitutional order. That's what we're focused on. As to other steps, you've heard what ECOWAS has said about preparing contingencies. We support what ECOWAS is doing. I don't want to get ahead of where we are now or get into any hypotheticals about what may happen in the future. This is a moment to focus intensely on the diplomacy, to end this crisis, to restore the constitutional order, that's clearly in the best interest of everyone, including those responsible for disrupting the constitutional order.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Secretary,
Hope you all get a
we'll
break.
be back sometime soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
I will continue on with the briefing and take a few folks'
Wait,
questions as well.
Vidal, can you wait like 15 minutes?
Seriously?
Sorry?
Seriously?
No one else has to do anything? Fine.
Okay. Okay, give me 1 second and then we will continue on with the DPB. Okay. All right. Kylie, go ahead.
I'm going to ask you the question I was going to ask the Secretary. It just occurs to me that he spoke about this weekend, the Trilateral Summit, and, you know, a broad range of issues that need to be addressed, economic, security-wise, and many of those are inherently related to China. But even in response to Matt's question, he avoided saying the word China throughout, you know, his discussion of the Trilateral Summit. So I'm just wondering why the Secretary is apparently avoiding, you know, outright saying that this weekend will be about the China threat in some way, shape, or form.
So I will say a couple things about that. First, the important thing to remember is that our approach to the PRC has been consistent from the beginning, and part of that, and you've seen the Secretary and others talk about this, is not just investing within ourselves, within the United States, but also deepening our alliance and convergence with our partners and allies, including, of course, the ROK and Japan. And to be clear, as you've heard us say before, we do not seek conflict or confrontation or a new Cold War, and you've seen consistent efforts on this from this administration to manage our competition with the PRC responsibly. But another piece of this, Kylie, is that we are not asking countries to choose between the United States and the PRC. What this is about is offering countries a choice of what partnership with the United States could look like, what a shared vision for a free and open world and a free and open Indo-Pacific can look like. That's not hyperbole. That is, in fact, our approach when it comes to the PRC, when it comes to countries around the world. And I think where we are seeing that in fruition is examples of this trilateral engagement, where, of course, an aspect of this is deeper alliance with important regional partners like the Republic of Korea and Japan, but there's also areas of immense cooperation that are important for the people of our three countries. Some of these areas that you mentioned, climate, energy, economic cooperation, further security partnerships as well. A lot of these things I think you'll see the leaders speak to the tail end of this week, so I'm not going to get ahead of that process. Go ahead, Olivia. Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know, we recently saw an historically large naval exercise jointly conducted by the Russians and the Chinese. So what effect do you think that, you know, these long-standing commitments that are expected to be made this weekend are going to have on what appear to have been really painstaking efforts by this administration to reestablish communication channels with China, coming as they are on the heels of other moves that Beijing has said or it views as provocative? And does Russia in particular stand to gain from a military standpoint here?
You know, Olivia, I would say that these things are not mutually exclusive. I think one, we believe that it is important for us to manage our relationship with the PRC responsibly. It's not just something that we expect of the PRC and ourselves, it's something that the international community expects of us also. But through that, we also can continue to invest in ourselves, invest in our alliances and partnerships with countries in the region like Korea and Japan as well. But we also have been clear about the the continued concern of the PRC and Russia closening their relationship and the steps that they've taken as well. So I don't think these things are zero-sum. We can continue to pursue all of these things appropriately. Shannon, go ahead. Yeah.
Do you anticipate during the summit that Travis King will come up in conversations? This is being held in North Korea. And are there any concerns that the summit, which is expected to anger North Korea, might create a danger for King and worsen his circumstances?
So the second part of your question, I think, is a little bit of a hypothetical. I'm just not going to speculate on that. What I would say broadly on the circumstances of Private King, I have no updates on this at this point. The Secretary spoke about this a little bit about a week and a half ago, as did Matt Miller. So no updates on that, and I will just let the summit go forward before previewing anything that might come out of it. But I think, to your point, Shannon, potential provocative action, potential activities by the DPRK that can be deemed as irresponsible and reckless, as destabilizing to the region, is one of the many things for why such a trilateral engagement is so important, and why we are taking these steps to further deepen our partnerships with the ROK and Japan. Janie, go ahead.
Thanks, Madam. Two questions. First questions. Today, Russian Defense Minister Shoigu said that military cooperation between North Korea and Russia did not pose a threat to the another countries. How can you comment on this? Is that threat, or what he said did not threat?
Well, Jenny, you've heard us speak about this a little bit before, and we continue to remain deeply concerned that the DPRK continues to provide military support to Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. And the Defense Minister Shoigu, as you noted, traveled to the DPRK to convince North Korea to sell more munitions to Russia to support Russia's war. Another piece of this is Russia having to rely on the support of interlocutors like the DPRK, like Iran, who has provided them drones, as you've heard us talk about before. I will also note that our information indicates that Russia is seeking to increase this kind of military cooperation with the DPRK. And so again, any kind of security cooperation or arms deal between North Korea and Russia would certainly violate a series of UN Security Council resolutions.
One more
Nike,
thing.
one more thing. I'll come to you right after. Go ahead, Jenny.
To counter the U.S. South Korea Japan summit, Chinese and Russian ambassadors met and held talks in Seoul, Korea, and Pyongyang. What symbolism do you think this is?
Sorry, could you repeat the first part of your question?
Because the Chinese and the Russian ambassadors met and held talks in between Seoul and Pyongyang.
Got it. So I think I spoke a little bit about this, so I will just reiterate that we are concerned about the PRC's continued alignment with Russia. I will let those two countries speak to their respective bilateral engagements, but this is something that we are continuing to pay close attention to, and we have been clear to the PRC that providing lethal aid to Russia, or providing Russia the means to systemically evade our sanctions, would have serious implications. Nike, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. On
Yeah.
the Trilateral summit,
Yeah.
can you talk about the extended deterrence amid the threats from North Korea? The United States and South Korea held its first nuclear consultative group talks under the Washington Declaration, and will such bilateral cooperation be expanded to trilateral cooperation on extended deterrence? And
So-
also separate, I have a separate question, but I'll ask later.
I think we'll move to your separate question really fast because this is all to say. I've been doing this long enough to know to not get ahead of the president. So I will let the Camp David summit take place and let the leaders speak to any deliverables or announcements that are going to be coming out from that. What I can just say, and I would echo what you've heard the secretary say, is that this is an important opportunity to deepen, strengthen some of the work that he started when he was Deputy Secretary of State with partners in the region, the ROK and Japan. But why don't you ask your next question?
Right. Can you talk about the improving ties between Japan and Korea? As you know, today is the National Liberation Day of Korea, where Korean people celebrate or commemorate its independence from the colonial rule of Japan. Can you talk about the recent visits between these two countries? How does that help the trilateral cooperation?
So I will let these two specific countries speak to their own bilateral relationships. But what I will just say, as from the United States perspective, as the third part of this trilateral engagement, that of course it is a good thing to see and something we certainly welcome to see the Republic of Korea and Japan deepening their partnerships as well.
And China has criticized the upcoming Camp David summit as an attempt to create a mini NATO. Would you like to comment?
So again, what this summit is about is getting countries together that share a vision of a free and open world, a free and open Indo-Pacific, an area that is interconnected, where people and goods can flow appropriately, where countries are free from coercion and able to choose their own path. And that is what we're looking forward to having the leaders discuss this at the end of this week at Camp David, and I'm sure that they will have more to announce from there as well. Vivian, I know you've had your hand up patiently.
I was actually going to ask about China's claims that this is a mini NATO, but what assurances, if any, has the U.S. given China that this is not meant to be a provocation directly against Beijing, but it's more about, strategic alliances in the region? I mean, anything that has sort of eased that concern with them. Obviously, we saw Russia had similar concerns about the real NATO, and uses it as its claim or its justification for its actions against Ukraine. And so, what, if any, efforts are you doing to kind of prevent that from happening in East Asia?
There is no reason to view this summit as provocative or any kind of step or effort to incite tensions. What this is about is deepening our partnership and collaboration on a number of areas that we believe are in the mutual shared interest of our three countries, and a lot of those are going to be in a lot of various spaces. Again, I don't want to get ahead of the president, and so I will let the summit speak for itself. Saeed,
thank you.
Your hand
Switching topics.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions on the Palestinian issue, and then a question on Julian Assange. I want to ask you the question that I would have asked the secretary had I been given the opportunity. I mean, he often talks about the two-state solution. The president talks about that. But now, I mean, it is probably easier to establish a colony on Mars than a state for the Palestinians. My question to you, what practical steps has the United States taken in the past few months to reverse the settlement process, the violence that the Israeli occupation is inflicting on the Palestinians, the stealing of the land, terrorists that you call terrorists that are being let out the following day, and so on? What have you done in terms of practical steps, pragmatic steps, away from all the rhetoric, and your commitment to the two-state solution? What have you done? And one last comment on this. Yeah. You have a normalization envoy. You don't have a peace envoy. You don't have a peace envoy, which the United States has had for decades, where you sort of started negotiations, brought people together, talked about this issue. Now you have a normalization. So the effort, the focus is on normalization between Arab countries and Israel. So please, just give me your thoughts.
So let me start with your second question first. I would just say in a broad brushstroke sense, as it relates to all of U.S. foreign policy, the particular designation of somebody in a specific role or a personnel decision to assign someone to a specific portfolio is not necessarily indicative of the weight that our government places on an issue. And to that point, Saeed, I would say that we have been quite clear from every corner of this administration from day one of how integral we see a negotiated two-state solution as a peaceful resolution to the current situation. I will also note that part of this, Saeed, is not having some sort of glitzy rollout of major policy steps or steps that we've taken. It is, to your question about what pragmatic steps have we taken, it is about pragmatic diplomacy, which is something that this secretary and others across this department, including individuals that you ask about, Assistant Secretary Barbara Leaf, Special Rep Hadi Amr, others have been engaged on quite directly. And so that is how we continue to see as the best path forward to getting us to a two-state solution is negotiating, discussing, raising these directly with the appropriate interlocutors. And that's what we'll continue to do. And when steps have been taken that we view take us further away from that, we, across this administration, have been vocal and will continue to do so.
Yet that not one settlement has been rolled back. Please allow me. So I wanted to ask you, can you share anything with us about appointing or nominating Jack Lew to as the next ambassador to Israel?
I have no personal updates
Right.
to
And
announce
lastly,
at
on
this
Julian
time.
Assange, the ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to Australia, Carolyn Kennedy, said that there may be a plea bargain in the making. Could you share with us anything that is ongoing at the present time to have him finally released?
I don't have any updates to share on that. I would let the Department of Justice speak to any of those pieces. Alex, go ahead.
Thanks, Matt. I have two questions on Ukraine and one on South Caucasus. Secretary, in his opening statement, urged Congress to approve supplemental requests. I'm just wondering if there's any concern on your end that this might not happen, or is there any what does traffic look like between this building and the Hill?
So I'm just certainly not gonna preview or try to look into a crystal ball. Our belief is our view. Let me take a step back. If you look at the support that we've seen for our Ukrainian partners from Congress, it's been clear that it has been not just bicameral, it has also been bipartisan. And we expect that to continue to go forward. We think that the supplemental is an important opportunity to continue to support our Ukrainian partners. Of course, when it comes to continuing to help them defend their country and defend their territorial integrity, but also in a number of other areas, Alex, like supporting food security efforts, supporting energy resilience efforts, all of these things that we know that our Ukrainian partners need support on. We are in touch with Congress regularly on this issue and on many other things. We stay in close touch with them, and so we'll continue to engage with them on that.
Thank you. Ukraine's ambassador to the U.S. was quoted by media saying that they are purchasing 5 new Patriots to be delivered next year. When should we expect from the State Department to send out a congressional notification of purchase? Are you guys working on that?
I have no updates on additional announcements of security assistance, Alex. What I would just say, and if you look back at over the entirety of this conflict, we have assessed the kinds of needs that our Ukrainian partners need, and we have attempted to meet those needs with the various provision of systems, either through us or either through allies and partners. And of course, that's you can expect that kind of engagement to continue, but I don't have anything to review.
Thank you. I'm moving to South Caucasus, if I may. Armenia, Azerbaijan. Headlines suggest that tension is deepening despite your efforts to bring about peace. How bad is the situation in your opinion, and why is it so bad?
So What I would say, Alex, is that we remain deeply concerned about the continued closure of the Lachen corridor, specifically its closure to commercial, humanitarian, and private vehicles. The halting of this kind of humanitarian traffic, in our opinion, it worsens the humanitarian situation and it undermines the efforts that have been in place to build confidence in the peace process. And so we urge the government of Azerbaijan to restore free transit of commercial, humanitarian, and private vehicles through this corridor. We're also aware that the UN Security Council has a meeting on Wednesday to discuss the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh, and we expect further discussions to take place there as well.
What is the U.S.'s position on that very issue? At the UN, do you have any message to send out to both sides?
I'm not going to get ahead of the meeting, Alex, but we have consistently emphasized and reiterated the fact that direct dialogue is essential to resolving this longstanding conflicts, and we think that any engagements that ultimately bring peace and stability to the people of the South Caucasus would be a good thing and a positive step forward. Myra, go ahead.
Vedant, I just want to follow up on the stuff that Secretary said about Niger.
Yeah.
You talked about the diplomacy that you guys are pursuing, but Acting Deputy Secretary Nuland was there. That meeting went rather poorly. And I'm looking at headlines saying West African Army chiefs will meet in Ghana to prepare for possible military intervention. So can you talk a little bit about or explain what kind of diplomatic avenue is left that U.S. is pursuing right now?
We continue to work with ECOWAS, with the African Union, with other partners around the world, as well as regional partners, to get this situation back on track and to maintain Niger's hard-earned democracy. The Secretary, as you all know, has had the opportunity to speak with ECOWAS leadership. He's obviously had the opportunity to speak with President Bazoum a number of times. Others in this department have had the opportunity to engage. We continue to want to see a diplomatic resolution to this. That's something we know that is shared by ECOWAS and other regional partners, and that's something that we're going to continue to work towards. I don't have a specific metric to offer you than beyond to say that this is something that we continue to believe is an avenue. And we will continue to work towards that.
What about that window that we've talked about in the past few weeks about, the window of opportunity to try to reverse this? Is it how open it is, or are you guys less hopeful?
We continue to believe that window is open, but of course, Humaira, every day, every minute that President Bazoum and his family continue to be detained, and every day that Niger's hard-earned democracy is not respected, that window closes a little bit, and that is why we're so actively engaged in this, and why we're hoping to find a diplomatic resolution.
Right,
this.
and finally, is there specifically on this meeting between West African Army chiefs that's going to happen Thursday, Friday? Do you guys have any specific plans to engage with them and ECOWAS afterwards? To sort of get some sort of a briefing, perhaps, or be involved in the process?
I will say I don't have anything to offer on specifics as it relates to that meeting. But what I will say is that we are in constant touch with ECOWAS and ECOWAS leadership, and we anticipate to remain deeply engaged in this through ECOWAS, through the African Union, and through, of course, our mission in Niamey as well. You had a fault. Go ahead. Yeah.
I understand that given the nature of how President Bazoum was unseated, it makes it very complicated for the U.S. to express any kind of optimism for the current government. But the U.S. obviously has very significant national security interests in Niger, and so I'm wondering, absent any kind of dramatic change in the situation, would the U.S. be potentially open to some sort of constructive alliance with the coup leaders, for lack of any better options, just given U.S. national security interests?
Vivian, we have been incredibly clear throughout the duration of this about the two outcomes that we would like to see. And that is, first, we want to see and ensure that President Bazoum and his family are kept safe We want to see them released, and we want to see the hard-earned democracy of Niger respected. And that continues to be our point of view and what we are calling for in our engagements, and it's a point of view that we know is shared by ECOWAS and the African Union as well. Probably only do a couple more. Go ahead, Shaheen Saab.
Thank you so much, Javali from Airway News Pakistan. So Pakistani authorities recently highlighted concerns over the $7 billion of military equipment left in Afghanistan. Pakistani ambassador in Washington, D.C., Masood Khan claimed that this military equipment now being used against Pakistan by TTP, Taliban Pakistan, and Daesh, ISIS. So could you please elaborate on the measures being taken to effectively address the issue and strengthen Pakistan's capabilities in countering these terrorist groups?
So we are in regular communication with the Pakistani leadership to discuss Afghanistan in detail, including through our counterterrorism dialogue and other bilateral consultations. We have a shared interest with Pakistan, quite candidly, in combating threats to regional stability and remain ready to work with Pakistan to combat militant and terrorist groups. We also support the government's own efforts to combat terrorism and ensure the safety and security of its citizens in a manner that promotes the rule of law. I don't have anything additional to offer. Obviously, our Department of Defense colleagues can speak to specific systems and assets.
So what is the United States perspective on the new Prime Minister of Pakistan? His caretaker government is responsible to hold the elections next 90 days. How do you see this?
So we're aware that the PNA and government have been dissolved, and note the announcement of Senator Anwar al-Haq Kakar, and he's been named the caretaker Prime Minister, and we look forward to working with the interim Prime Minister and his team as they prepare to hold elections. We, of course, will continue to partner with Pakistan on areas of mutual interest, including our interest on Pakistan's economic stability, prosperity, and security, and the conduct of free and fair elections and the respect for democracy and the rule of law. Go ahead.
Thanks so much. Taiwan's vice president transited through, will be transiting back through later on in a few days. There's been the response from the Chinese Foreign Ministry, which usually does respond to these types of things. Has the United States noticed a change or evolution in the way that China has been responding to these types of transits?
So I'm not going to assess or analyze actions that the PRC may or may not have taken from up here. What I will just say, and I touched a little bit on this yesterday, is that there's no reason for Beijing to turn this transit, which is, as I will reiterate, it is consistent with longstanding U.S. policy and practice, into any kind of pretext for coercion or any kind of provocative activity. We do not intend to change the status quo. Such transits are consistent with our One China policy, and that will continue to be the case. Okay, last question. Go ahead.
Washington. Thank you, sir. Saudi Arabia announced the appointment of its ambassador to the Palestinian Authority and a non-resident consul in Jerusalem. Next, the Israeli foreign minister said they will not allow opening a Saudi diplomatic mission of the Palestinian Authority in Jerusalem. What's your comment? And is this Saudi step related to the normalization with Israel?
So I would refer you to the kingdom and the Israeli government for comment about their own diplomatic interactions. As a general matter, we continue to support our full normalization with Israel. Our support for full normalization with Israel, and continue to talk with regional partners, including Saudi Arabia, about how to make progress in that space. We continue to believe that regional integration benefits U.S. national security. It benefits national security interests, as well as the interests of our regional partners and the people of the United States. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks everyone. Thanks everybody.
One more, please.